Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. First time ever, Friday night into Saturday, we got ourselves some 12-team college football playoff games, baby. That is right. The 12-team playoff kicks off Friday night. And what I want to do, I did the college football betting show on Wednesday, gave out my official previews, my official picks. Again, if you want long form on this stuff, go ahead and search college football betting with Aaron Torres on Apple, Spotify, as well as YouTube. Today, though, I'm just going to give my quick picks and my quick thoughts on the games. We'll just go in chronological order because I believe that's probably the best and most efficient way to do this. Let's go ahead and start with the Friday night game. Listen, I love this. I love that we have a Friday night game. I love that it is in cold weather. By now, everybody's seen snow flurries. It's going to be below freezing in South Bend as Indiana visits Notre Dame. Notre Dame is a 7.5-point favorite. The over-under in this game is set at 52.5. So listen, first of all, I'll say this. We're going to talk a little bit about the Tennessee invasion of Ohio State in a second and maybe later in the show. But here's the truth. You look at ticket prices, this is the highest ticket, and I believe that you are going to see a lot of red in Notre Dame Stadium on Friday night. Obviously, a historic season for Indiana, an incredible run. And listen, Indiana obviously has fans all over the state. The two campuses are separated by about 3.5 hours. But Indiana fans are all over the state of Indiana. I think they're going to come out in droves. And I'm not saying it's going to be a neutral site game, but I think you're going to see a lot of red in that stadium like you did a few years ago when Georgia played Indiana. So that's the setup for this game. I think it's going to be fascinating. And I'll tell you this, I think it's going to be a little bit more competitive than a lot of people think. Bottom line, when this line came out, I was like, oh, hammer Notre Dame. They're awesome. I've talked on this show. I'm not going to put out like an official bracket, but Notre Dame is lined up to play Georgia in round 2. And I think Notre Dame actually could give Georgia trouble. Thing is, they got to get through this game first. And I think Indiana is going to give them a little bit more fits than people think. Why do I think that? It is because of a few reasons. One, Notre Dame's strength on offense goes right up against Indiana's strength on defense. Remember, what does Indiana do better than anybody? Number one, run defense in college football. Now, you can say, oh, they haven't played anybody. Doesn't matter, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Here's the truth. Go back to that Ohio State game. Everybody says that Ohio State-Indiana game was a blowout. No, it wasn't. Ohio State was basically gifted 14 points by Indiana, and Ohio State didn't break 300 yards of total offense until literally the final drive of the game. And so I bring it up because that run game was slowed down. Now, Indiana's offense certainly struggled against a very good Ohio State defense, but Indiana really slowed down Ohio State. They didn't break 100 yards rushing or 300 yards of total offense until the final drive when the game was essentially over, okay? And so I bring it up because you look at Notre Dame. They want to run the football. 108th in pass attempts this year in college football out of 134 teams. Riley Leonard has not thrown for over 250 yards all season. And I think this one could be a little bit close. I think it could be a little bit competitive. However, my official pick, my official best bet is in fact the under of 52.5. Now, it's worth noting this number is going up because we got it at 51.5 on the college football betting show. But I think I think it's going to be the under because Notre Dame's defense is elite. Indiana's offense has struggled against the two best defenses that they saw all year. It wasn't just Ohio State where they essentially could not move the ball. It was also, remember, Michigan 2 weeks before. Michigan, they scored a touchdown early, then they scored a touchdown to start the second quarter. They did not find the end zone for the final, 2.5 quarters of that game. They finished with 20 points, a couple field goals. Indiana really struggled to move the football against the two best defenses they saw all year. I think they're going to struggle again. I think Notre Dame does enough to win, but I don't know that this is going to be a blowout. I think this has like 20-13, 20-12, 21-7 written all over it. And so rather than taking the Notre Dame and the points, I'm going to go ahead and take the under. I will pick Notre Dame to win, but my official best bet is under 52.5. Let's keep it going. Saturday afternoon, noon Eastern on TNT. I remember talking on the show when TNT got these college football playoff games in the summer, how weird it's going to be to have college football playoff games on TNT. but I bring it up because it's SMU versus Penn State. Penn State, an 8.5-point favorite. The over-under in this game is 53.5. Now, it's worth noting, like Notre Dame, temperatures expected to be below freezing come kickoff. Also worth noting, precipitation expected in South Bend Friday night. Precipitation expected in State College on Friday night, which means we could have a wet, slick field on Saturday. With SMU, listen, I think it's interesting. I think so many people spend so much time just arguing about SMU versus Bama and that whole back and forth. I don't think anybody remembers that SMU against Clemson was sort of the better team for about 2.5, 3 quarters. Remember, SMU turned the ball over on the opening drive, led to an easy Clemson score. But the second half, SMU largely dominated. 24 points in the second half. They finished with well over 100 yards more offense than Clemson, even though they lost. Penn State, think it's very interesting to me. That Oregon game was like the outlier of all outliers, is that if I had told you that Penn State was going to be within a touchdown of Oregon, you would have assumed it was defense, it was ball control, it was whatever. Penn State finished with over 500 yards of total offense. They finished with like almost 300 yards rushing. They averaged 9 yards per, I think it was like 8 yards per carry, 9 yards per carry against Oregon. I don't know if that's replicable, especially in these weather conditions. And so my pick for this game, I actually do like Penn State, or I like Penn State and SMU. I like SMU to cover in this game. I like SMU plus 8.5. Why is that? One, the SMU run game is, or SMU run defense, is really good. Top 5 nationally. They held Clemson to 62 yards on 31 carries, something like that, 2 yards per carry. So they have had a great run game all year. I don't think James Franklin is going to open it up in cold weather, wet conditions, and oh, by the way, a game that he should win. We've seen James Franklin in close, tight games where pressure is on. What does he do? Curls up in that little turtle shell and tries to win every game 13-10. And so when you look at this game, SMU comes in with nothing to lose. Penn State sort of has everything to lose because they have such a nice draw in this bracket. They win this game, they're going to play Boise State in round 2. And so I just bring it up because there's actually a lot of pressure on Penn State in this game to get this victory. Penn State, in games where there's pressure, James Franklin usually doesn't open up the playbook. Like I said, I don't think this is let Drew Aller cook. I think Penn State wins. I think it's low scoring, but I like SMU plus the points. I'll say Penn State 24, SMU 20. Penn State wins and advances, but I think it's a little bit closer than people think. Let's keep it going to the late afternoon. Clemson at Texas, the only game obviously not impacted by weather. Clemson enters this one as an 11.5-point underdog. Texas, an 11.5-point favorite. The over-under set at 51.5. Couple thoughts here. One, let's just be honest. That Texas offense has not been good. You go back and look. Texas hasn't really played like a complete great game since the Oklahoma game in early October. Lose to Georgia. You think, okay, they'll bounce back after that. They survive Vanderbilt and Diego Pavia. We're going to talk about Diego Pavia in a minute. You look at after that, Arkansas was a struggle. Kentucky, they were in control, but they never really dominated. Texas A&M was close. I know that was a crazy environment, but 16-6, they're not dominating. And then, of course, what happened a few weeks ago against Georgia. And so when I look at this game, I think it's fascinating because to me, I just don't know what you should realistically expect from this Texas offense. And I think the bigger question is, what is the situation with Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning? I said it after the Georgia game. I said it during the Georgia game. I said I didn't like in the first Georgia game deciding to switch to Quinn Ewers, deciding to not go to I didn't like benching Quinn Ewers in the first game. I thought it was all downside, zero upside. Best case scenario in that situation is that Arch Manning plays well. Then you got a quarterback controversy. But I bring it up because I said in the Georgia game, if you're going to bench Quinn Ewers in the first game, why are you not benching him in this game? So I'm curious if Arch Manning does get some playing time. He probably should. But I'm also curious how Clemson responds in this game. They, like SMU, have nothing to lose. In terms of my pick, it's actually pretty straightforward. It's another under. I know unders aren't sexy, but here's the bottom line, is that Clemson, sort of one-dimensional. The defense is not great, But the offense really, one thing they do well is throw the football phenomenally. Cade Klubnik, 33 touchdown passes this year. I don't think people realize how good this kid was, over 3,000 yards passing. The issue is that Texas pass defense is number one in America. This is one of my favorite stats. Texas has almost a 5-to-1 interception to passing touchdown allowed ratio. Texas had 19 interceptions, 4 passing touchdowns allowed. So I don't know that Clemson can move the ball. I don't know that Texas is going to be able to move the ball because I think that offense kind of stinks. And so I think it's ball control. I think they run it a lot. I think Texas wins. I think it's somewhere, 24-13, something like that. But the under of 51.5 is my pick. I know it's not sexy, but I do like the under there. Really quickly, last game. Oh, and we'll be talking maybe a little bit more about this one here momentarily. I do want to talk about Tennessee at Ohio State. Tennessee, of course, enters this game on the road. We're going to talk about the big Vol invasion in a second, but Ohio State, a 7.5-point favorite. The over-under set at 46.5. First of all, the Tennessee invasion is a real thing. I think it went from kind of, is this really going to happen, to whatever. You had Ross Bjork, the AD at Ohio State, literally begging fans earlier this week, do not sell your tickets to somebody you don't know. They're probably a Vol fan. We've all seen on Twitter all the promo codes and discount codes, and if you use code Buckeye, you can get in, this and that. Ohio State has tried to limit it, but also Ohio State has not had very much success, because I know a lot of Tennessee fans that are going, and one thing about Tennessee fans is that it feels like, this season has been one that has been special, has been planned for. They've taken over other stadiums. I mean, even in the game they lost to Arkansas, I knew people at that game that were like, Torres, I could not believe how many Tennessee fans were at that game. So I just bring it up because there's going to be a lot of orange. And listen, we talked about it with Zach Smith a few days ago, I think there's some real hostility in that city right now. And I think if Ohio State struggles out of the gate, I think there's going to be a lot of tension in that building. And I think there's going to be some boos for Ryan Day. So we could go break it all down and talk about, this matchup and that matchup. Listen, Ohio State has players. Nobody doubts that. But Ohio State had players against Michigan, lost at home. Ohio State, they've had good moments and bad moments, but in pressure games where the spotlight is on, they have historically struggled under Ryan Day. And I would also add this, the matchup just isn't good for Ohio State, because the biggest weakness that they have, 2 starters out for the year on the offensive line. Well, guess what happens? Tennessee's pass defense, pass rush is as good as anybody they've faced, including Oregon and Penn State this year. And so to me, this is actually kind of an easy pick. My pick is pretty straightforward. I like Tennessee to cover. And I'll say this, I like Tennessee to win. I mean, take the 7.5 because I think it's a gimme. I know Nico on the road is, but Josh Heupel has been playing close to the vest games on the road all year long, relying on the defense, relying on the run game. I don't think the weather is going to be an issue for Tennessee. They play kind of cold weather football. They're one of actually the more northern SEC schools. So it's not like you're Miami, and I know Miami's not in the SEC, but it's not like you're Miami. It's not like you're Florida State. It's not like you're Florida. It's not like you're LSU, and you're going from 85 degrees to 30. Like, Tennessee is sort of built like a cold weather team, is a northern-ish school. I don't think it's going to impact them. What I do think is going to impact someone is Ohio State, those fans, and what will happen if they struggle early. I think Tennessee wins. I'm going to take the points, but if I had to put a prediction on the game itself, I'll say Tennessee final score. I'll say Tennessee. It's been a common score that I've used. I'll say 24-20. I think both defenses are elite. Ohio State has leaned on that defense. I like Tennessee to win outright, but I say just take the points, because I think 7.5 in the shoe. A lot of Tennessee fans, Ohio State fans, frustrated with the state of their program. I think that's a lot of points for Tennessee to have.